Jennifer, welcome to Art and Cocktails. I'm so excited to have you on the show, and I got to meet you a few weeks ago, which was such a treat at Superfine. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. It was so lovely meeting you in person.
Yes, it was definitely a highlight for me, and I snagged two beautiful paintings, and I knew I had to have you on the show. One, I am obsessed with your work. Two, you're such a lovely person.
Aw.
And three, I think our listeners are really going to benefit from learning about you and your story. So I would love to start at the beginning. I would love to hear a little bit about your journey as an artist. Was this something you've always wanted to do, or is it something that happened later on in life? Can you share a little bit how you got started?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the lovely things you said about me and my personality and my art. That was so sweet. So, likewise, it was so lovely meeting you and getting to soak up some cat energy. Starting back, I was the art kid. I was definitely like the artsy friend in high school. My friends were musicians and theater majors, and I always was making art, and I knew I would study art. And my parents were very supportive of me going to college and studying what I wanted. They definitely talked sense into me when I wanted to go to art school and spend six figures on a 4-year degree. So they convinced me to hang back, and I went to community college in Sacramento. I live in Northern California. I grew up in the Sierra Nevada mountains in very rural Northern California. And then I would drive down the hill as a teen and an early 20-year-old and take all these art classes in the big city. Our big city was Sacramento. But I had amazing teachers and I got hooked. I still to this day use art history color mixing book that I made in community college all those years ago. And I took meticulous notes. I did know and intend to go into teaching. And I wanted to teach everyone art, and I was always been very democratic about bringing art to the people. So I went to community college, and instead of going to like fine art private school, I went to a liberal arts school in Oakland, California. And at the time, it was a women's college, and it was like art Hogwarts.
I'm starting to love this.
It was so lovely. Library had all these rare books, and the art history classes were focused on women artists. And then I got to learn under these amazing, talented, prolific teachers that were big names in the Bay Area. And then my friend was in the MFA program, and I was in the undergrad, and it was seamless. They had an amazing museum on campus. So I got to work in the student art gallery and the museum and handle the collection. And I just got to nerd out for years. And I went to every lecture, I went to every studio happening in San Francisco. And thought I was going to be that statistic that I'm going to keep making art. I'll never not make art after school.
My
And I
God.
graduated and I fell in love with teaching and children. And I had a plan to go get my MFA eventually, but I never did. I got my teaching credential and I taught art, and I always like painted in between, but I was okay with my art being teaching, bringing art to children. In California, there's not a big budget for K-12 arts. And I really thought elementary kids, middle school kids deserved art and access to the arts. So that was my passion for 10 years. And then I took a break into the classroom.
That's so amazing. I'm going to ask you some more questions about that, but it's funny. Sometimes we think, going back to what you said about going to community college versus some private school,
Right.
I always had a chip on my shoulder because I thought, oh no, I didn't go to this fancy art school. And I felt really self-conscious about it. But when I graduated and I got to meet lots of people that were then my clients who went to these fancy schools,
Yeah.
it really
Yeah.
opened my eyes that it's just about we get lucky sometimes with the teachers have, even if it's not a super expensive program. And also the energy we put in, right? Because you could go to Harvard and not pay attention and not
Right.
participate and have nothing to show for it. So I really love that you shared
Absolutely.
that. It's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I know I talked a lot on that and I didn't mean to speak over you at all, but it was a journey and it's been a journey, and all that little healing, all the little voices you hear, all the beautiful catalogs we got from Savannah and RISD, and you're like, I have to go there.
Yes. And I'm sure it is lovely to be in those schools
Yeah.
also. So shout out to all
Yeah.
the art schools and all the art teachers that are doing their good job. And
Absolutely.
speaking of teaching, so you decided to pursue teaching and tell me how you said you also took a break from that. I would love to hear about how that impacted your own work because I think I don't teach in the same way, not in the traditional sense, but I learned so much from my clients, and I'm sure that kids and interacting with other humans, making art, talking about art definitely impacts your work.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. I think anyone who is an auntie or a parent or in education know that children are so inspiring and they're just these amazing sponges. And what I loved about getting my teaching credential and my master's in education was learning about brain development and human development. And we all know going to a kindergarten classroom, it's cliche, but you ask kids, they all know they're artists, they all know they're scientists. And then this thing happens between third and fifth grade where their little brains start comparing themselves to one another because their prefrontal cortex starts to develop. So it's natural. We are meant to compare. But that's when most kids decide that they're not artists or they're not readers. And even with that, even teaching those grade levels and teaching the kids the meta, thinking about the thinking and being in there with art class, it is so fun and exciting to challenge them. Don't listen to your brain. It's trying to trick you and tell you you're bad at art.
Oh, I love that. That's something we
It's
all need to hear.
absolutely. And I still apply it every day. I know that through your coaching and your business, you learn a lot about trauma-informed practices and healing. And there's just so much inner child work. So I had an amazing childhood, and my parents were supportive and gave me access to nature and art. But I feel like through teaching, I really got to heal and make sure you're all artists. Are you listening, children? And are you listening, Jennifer?
Yes, because they're still in our inner self. There is still that inner child as well. And it's sometimes healing to go back and say these things to ourselves too. For parents listening who may have little ones that might be creatively inclined, do you have any tips for how to help them foster this as they get older and as the world might start implanting some new messages into their little heads?
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking to students about how your brain is trying to trick you, especially that age. Some kids develop it younger, but third to fifth grade, they really start comparing themselves. And I think I'm sure you were drawn at a young age. And my poor brother, compared to me, they decide that they're not an artist because they're sitting next to Jennifer, they sit next to Molly in class. And I could never draw how what kids choose to draw at first, like SpongeBob or whatever cartoon they're into. And they're like, I could never do that. And they give up. So encouraging children, well, some people are artists and some people are really good at math, and these things come easily to one person or the other, but that doesn't mean you should quit altogether. We know so many artists that didn't grow up in a creative environment, or they came from the sciences, or they came from math. So we know really anyone can be an artist. It's just a frame of mind. So encouraging kids to stay optimistic and to claim that title and never let it go and just keep making art. It sounds simple, but it really is keep making art and making it accessible to kids.
For sure. Thank you for sharing that. Now, back to your work. I am in love with your paintings, and I'm
Oh,
curious about how you got started. Were you always interested in nature? I know you have some geometric elements and a little sci-fi. Can you talk about how did you get to this particular body of work? How did it evolve over the years?
yeah, thank you for asking. I refer to my paintings. I am a painter. I refer to them as my visionary landscape paintings, and I coined or came up with that term for my own paintings through this journey of to paint this and I like to paint that. And what does it look like when those things come together? So in art school, I had amazing professors where I figured out how to render the beautiful, perfect landscape and some of these more architectural paintings. And then these professors were so good at helping me figure out what I'm trying to say. So I do read a lot of science fiction and not like doom and gloom.
Ooh, give us some of your favorites to read. Now I feel like I need to
Yeah,
read and then look at your paintings.
absolutely. So I read the books and I consume the shows and the movies. So my favorite authors are Octavia Butler and Ursula Le Guin. And I they're considered visionary authors because they are writing these possible futures for us. And Octavia kind of, it's hard, and there's some dark things in there where we don't want to live in those realities. But there's also certain books where these authors are imagining us out of the problems that we have, whether it's climate catastrophe or social structures. Ursula Le Guin has books where the entire book is like, what would it be like to visit a planet that has this peaceful anarchy? And it's so never read anything like that. And they're women and they're thinking about what if the kings weren't in charge or these companies weren't in charge. And a lot of current contemporary Black women or queer Black women are writing books imagining these futures where these awful things didn't happen to their culture and their people. And so I love this idea that science fiction and visionary fiction can help us imagine us out of these issues and these dark realities. I love Star Trek. I'm a total Trekkie.
Oh my gosh, that's so inspiring. It's so interesting because, of course, now I'm going to have to read some of those books, some of those authors that you just shared. But sometimes when I'm reading, it almost triggers the same feeling that I get when I see something. And I'm curious, as did you have a specific moment where maybe you were reading or studying something and you're like, how can I make this a visual thing? Or how did it happen for you that you put the two and two
Yeah.
together?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard to decipher, discern. I collect vintage science fiction books written by women, usually with male pen names. It's so fascinating, the history of that, the marketing those books. And I think there are book cover designs, and then everything from the Jetsons to vintage Star Trek. There's that atomic era. What we think of as futuristic is still 1960s. What does it look like to go to the moon? So we call it retrofuturism. And mid-century modern architecture, like atomic era architecture, it all has this element of hope for the future. What would our future look like if science did solve our problems and going to the moon meant that the possibilities for humans and the future of our planet was endless. So I feel like it's hard for me to decipher where the visual inspiration and the imagination and these visuals from science fiction realms come into my
Either way,
head.
I love it so much. Thank you so much for explaining that. And you are a nature lover also. So to juxtapose and complement somehow at the same time, I don't know, it works beautifully in your work. Can you tell me about, you shared a little bit when I met you at Superfine about the images that you are inspired by that help you create your paintings, and where do you find these? Literally, they look like alien, but like the most beautiful way landscapes. But apparently they're real, which
They
was like they're so stunning. But there's also mysterious, and it's almost when I look at them, I've been staring at my pieces that I've acquired. I feel like they feel familiar, but also very foreign at the same time. But they're grounded in reality. So can you share about your visual inspiration?
absolutely. I am definitely drawn to the otherworldly landscape that is still on planet Earth, but it happens to look like the backdrop of Dune or Star Wars. But so bringing those actual physical landscapes that do look like another planet and then showing people like this is our planet and it should be protected, it should be honored. And if we were to stumble upon this and come across another planet, we would think like, oh my goodness, look at this amazing thing. We should protect it. We should honor it. There's this amazing art bookstore in my town and an artist who runs it. She's one of the co-owners, and her name's Laurelyn. And we are talking about that exact concept. If you stumbled upon this landscape or a little axolotl on another planet, people would be like, wow, I got to protect that. That is so special. But these things are here on planet Earth, and these landscapes actually exist. So there are the otherworldly landscapes, but I also like take my favorite places. My recent series is featuring California public lands. So whether it's like Pinnacles National Park or Yosemite or the Central California coast, and then using some of those mid-century modern color palettes, those hopeful, optimistic color palettes to make it a little bit more otherworldly and off-planet seeming, but it is still our planet. It's still planet Earth. Those are real places.
It's so beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. Do you have any tips for artists looking back when you started to find your voice and piece these things together, your visuals, the deeper meaning, and this love of nature? Do you have any tips of how to combine all the things that you're trying to say? Because you do it well. And I think what makes a great painting so wonderful is that it's still open-ended. You don't need to over-explain anything. You don't need to squeeze every little thing in there. But with a little bit, it can say a lot. Do you have any tips for artists trying to find that communication in their own style? And how did you arrive at your current style?
Absolutely. Thank you. That's such a great question because this is for my past self. She would have appreciated this advice. I think don't hide the things that you think majority of other people won't relate to. So it's so easy to be like, oh, I'm going to hide that I'm really into Star Trek or that I have these radical ideas about our access to nature and our political system. So letting your freak flag show, not being afraid to say the things you want to say through your art. It's going to come out when you're talking to people. It's going to come out every brush stroke. I usually connect with they're not exactly my target audience at these art shows, but it's like boyfriends and the husbands that are like, I recognize some of the sci-fi, which I know plays into gender stereotypes, but my boyfriend and a lot of the men in my life, that's what we talk about.
Hey, and not everyone has to fully understand it either. I
No.
don't personally dive into those topics too much, but I'm very drawn to your work. And to me, it means something completely different, which is the
Yeah.
beautiful thing about art, too. People don't need to know exactly what it is. And in fact, having some of those Easter eggs and things for the viewers to
Fun.
discover is really lovely.
Absolutely. I think you've talked about how, oh, completely off my train of thought.
That's
Never
okay. I was
mind.
going to ask you.
Continue.
It'll come back. Yeah, it'll come back if it's important. That's what I say. But speaking of art shows, you recently were in San Francisco for Superfine, which is where I got to meet you in person. How was that experience for you? And do you have any tips for artists who are putting themselves out there for the first time at an art fair or an art market or something like that?
Thank you. I had a blast at Superfine. And if you don't know, Superfine Art Fair is an art fair run by artists for artists. And I did not need to be a part of a gallery to participate in this art fair. I applied and my artwork was accepted, and I worked with the curators of the art show. And every aspect of my experience was positive. I think this was the art fair I wish I had had a year ago because there was so much hand holding and support that they were teaching us how to make a sale and how to talk about art and how to make sure presentation is important. Everything is level. All the little labels are there. Your booth, there's cohesion. We all had the same stools and the same exact tables. It looked very professional. And I started doing little art markets and art fairs a year ago now. And it took me that long to get better at talking about my art and talking about my art in three different ways. So having a little elevator pitch, but three different versions of it, because someone might be asking a similar question and the person you just explained your elevator pitch to is still in your booth. That's big advice because you feel awkward talking about your art and saying the same exact. People feel it when it's too robotic. So being prepared to talk about your art in multiple ways, I think is my biggest piece of advice.
I love that. You did a really beautiful job. Of course, I was already drawn to your work because I knew it before before I saw it, but you did such a great job being personable. And I think
Oh,
it's hard when you're first doing it, when you're first putting yourself out there and meeting new people, but really it's not that complicated. I think just to be friendly and know
yeah.
the people want to be, if they're stopping at your booth, they truly want to be there. No one's forcing them to stay, and they're drawn in for whatever reason. So you don't have to act. You don't have to say anything too crazy. The
No.
good thing about being an artist is yes, we do have to talk about it, but mostly our art it does its job.
It does. And just like anything else, you're a new workout class, you're trying to be personable. You start talking to people about their dog or their outfit, and then your art
Yes,
concept,
and you talk to me about the things that I care about, which is hiking and cute drinks and cute things and your beautiful studio in your yard, right? It's in your home. It's
Yes.
amazing.
Oh,
So
thank
that's the
you.
stuff. It doesn't have to be anything super crazy, but it's
No.
important to the person you're talking to. So thank you for giving me a
Aw,
great experience. That's
thank you for being
why.
easy to talk to. Yes, now we're friends. I think there's so many friends to make and to have going to those art fairs, your trauma bond with the person next to you, the artist next to you. And
True.
then you're dead afterwards. There's no, let's go out for drinks. Let's go back to the hotel and pass out.
Let's have one drink and just sleep,
Yeah,
however much
sleep.
you can, those busy events.
Exactly.
It's so real. Thank you so much for that. I would love to ask you also about how you manage your studio practice. There is no right or wrong way to be an artist. There's no amount of hours or schedules you need to have. But I always love to hear how people create. And you have this beautiful studio that's this magical structure in your yard, which I'm very inspired by because I'm currently making my shed into a studio.
Yeah,
Pinnacle of my life. I'm very
it
excited
is.
about it. I would love to hear how do you manage your day job and your creativity?
Yes, thank you. I think sometimes I'm shy to even say I have a day job because we tell ourselves these things like, won't take me seriously unless I'm
And that's venture BS.
full time, right? But let's define full time. This is the thing I'm thinking about 24/7 when I can't sleep, right? Think you've touched on it in other podcasts. I love your podcasts. I just think it's the right amount of encouragement and positivity and deep gems of lessons that we have to have cycles and we have to take care of ourselves. And ideally, we're in the studio every day and painting and making art 24/7, but creating little healthy boundaries and rhythms. And definitely, as someone who loves nature and looks to nature for inspiration, trying to embrace those cycles. So whether it's my own inner feminine cycle, moon cycle, or the seasonal cycle, that there are different seasons for different things. And I came back from that art fair and I just needed to rest and decompress. And then I mentioned it to you before we started recording that there were all these life things that I put off. So I am gentle with myself after the art fairs. I would love to at least be making something in my studio for 30 minutes a day. And I'm so privileged to be able to walk out my back door and I have a backyard, a little studio shed, and that's the way I like it. I always want this, which is a little bigger one day. Universe is listening, and my boyfriend knows. So listening to my body, resting, taking care of myself, and just not always the grind. I have a day job and I like that it's only 4 hours a day. That is lovely. I wish it wasn't in the morning because that is my creative peak time. But I create a morning and the afternoon. I take a little break. I do my exercise or I walk around the block and then I treat it back to morning with my little afternoon iced tea and I hit the easel. So figuring out what fits into your life and how you can be gentle and not hard on yourself when you do need to rest and you don't feel like painting, don't do it.
Absolutely. You're not going to win a trophy for being the most in your studio or showing up the most. And that actually used to be me. And I really wish my younger self could hear this episode because I was so paranoid about not painting and becoming a statistic of, oh, 90% of students never make art. I was so paranoid and I really worked hard to disprove it. But then I realized it also has to come from like genuine place. Otherwise, you become a robot. Puts out paint, and that's not the point of it all. And I think just being kind to yourself, knowing like, you're not going to stop making art at this point. It's too late. You got
Too
to keep
late.
going, and it's okay. Part of making art is going on hikes and seeing new experiences, meeting new people, reading books, getting new ideas,
Absolutely.
watching movies sometimes too visually can be so inspiring. So I think just reframing what it means and not being so rigid about our practice can be so, so wonderful.
It's,
Thank you for
it's
sharing.
so true. Yeah,
And
thank
honestly, it's
you.
it's funny because I work for myself now. And sometimes I have projects and things that keep me busy, but even this week I have all day to paint if I really wanted to, and I don't. And
Right?
sometimes it's
Right?
procrastination, I will admit. Sometimes it's just not. something that I'm proud of, but sometimes I just need to chill and read a book
Right?
and relax. So just knowing yourself is so important.
Exactly. If there's something that's going to force you to confront your perfectionistic procrastination cycles, it's an art business.
Yep, it's either what is a fight or flight? Either I'm working 24/7 or I'm
Yeah,
just avoiding altogether.
there's nothing in between.
And there's nothing in between. I'm trying to get to the in between thing, but I don't think it's possible for artists. I think we're very much, and it's okay because it's like, once again, going with the cycle.
Yeah,
Sometimes you have a lot of energy and inspiration, and sometimes you're just like a potato, and that's totally fine.
the potato. Exactly. I completely agree. And I think what you said, watching movies and ingesting and finding that balance between producing and consuming. And I love to read. So the books, reading the business books, the books about nature, the nonfiction books, and the fun, dreamy sci-fi stuff. I think it's so important to make sure you have these, I almost said income streams.
Yes, inspiration streams. I love that so much. Just as
Yeah.
important, if not more important. Oh my gosh, Jennifer, this was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your story and a little peek inside your process with us. What's coming up next for you? Where can our listeners find you? Tell us more.
Yes, I mentioned I'm based in Sacramento. I have an art show coming up. So in May, I have a solo show at a new
Hey.
gallery, women-owned gallery. The gallery is called Jane Gallery. It's in East Sacramento, and the show is called State of Change, Visions of California. So I'm really excited about that.
That's so
Yeah, that's
beautiful.
thank you. And I have a few little art fairs in the Bay Area. So Sacramento's close to the Bay Area, not close enough to be considered the Bay Area, but close enough that I can go down there and connect with some collectors. So I'll be at the Saratoga Art Show at the beginning of May and the Montclair Art Walk in Oakland, California at the end of this month. So
Congratulations. That's so
thank you.
exciting. Can't wait to follow along. I'll make sure to link your website and social media to our listeners in the notes so they can follow along. Thank you so much for being on the show, Jennifer. It was truly a pleasure, and I can't wait to see what you create next.
Thank you. I so enjoyed talking to you about inspiration and balance and all the yummy art things. Thank you, Kat. I appreciate it.
Thank you.